You did it. I issued a challenge, nay, a proclamation unto you, the masses, to give unto me your wildest, craziest theories for Xenoblade Chronicles 4, and possibly the identity or the story of Mythra's missing kid. And did you deliver? Oh, did you deliver? There were over 100 freaking replies, by the way. I'm not Eminem, I can't talk that fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a two-parter, possibly a three-parter, seeing how things progress from here. And if you want to see those future episodes, those future videos, and my series where I break down Xenoblade Chronicles in its entirety, entitled The Chronicles of Xenoblade, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload in the future. But today, let's delve into your theories. We're going to lead off, at the plate with Hector Gutierrez, who dropped quite possibly the most perfect, nay, let me reiterate it for emphasis, perfect name for Xenoblade Chronicles 4. Xenoblade Saga. It's perfection. You drop Chronicles from the name, because who gives a crap about that? You replace Chronicles with Saga, which is pretty much the same thing, in before some English teacher tries to correct me here. Xenoblade Saga, tying Blade and Saga together into one harmonious whole, like chocolate syrup and milk. You combine the two into a delicious beverage, upon which you slurp it down into your throat. You let it coat every part of your inside. It's perfect. Xenoblade Saga. I'm fully on board with that name. That name is narrative perfection in my eyes. Does it even need a defense? You canonize Saga pretty much. And there's no shot they drop Xenoblade as a name because that's the name that's gotten brand recognition, and there's no shot that after basically 20 freaking years of trying to get brand recognition that you change the name up to a degree where you drop Xenoblade from the name. There's no shot that's happening, but calling it Xenoblade Saga is recognizable for people who played Xenoblade, but also brings Saga into the mix. I love it. I freaking love it. I want to see the art. I want to see the graphic already. I need it. Not a desire. It's a need, an appetite that must be fulfilled. Now let us delve more into a lore-based theory here. Xenolith comes in swinging with the game will take place generations after the events of 1 and 3 and 2. And Matthew will make a cameo because he's been reborn after all these generations. And you know what? I feel like there's two main scenarios. We're going to talk about this later on with a couple of the other theories. I think either you pick up the story from Xenoblade 3's ending about 10 years in the future so you get the cast back up to where they were in Ionios, or you go something along these lines and you skip a few generations and then you have one of the underlying notes of the story for Xenoblade 4 be essentially learning from the past and what came before and how this new world came to be and the mysteries that lie within. I think that's a definite possibility for where they go in the future. It gives them time to establish new world orders, new politics, to flesh out a new world that has a bit of a history and backstory to it while still feeling fresh and new. They have a lot of leeway when it comes to constructing a world like that with skipping a few generations. They can do it something similarly with just a new world about 10 years after the rejoining, but I definitely think this is a possibility. So let's move on to another. We move on to the Megaton Menace, which just sounds like a perfect boxing name, who comes in with, I think Mythra's kid will be in Xenoblade 4, and will be the actual protagonist. We didn't meet them in any capacity, so it would count as a new character. It won't be a Glimmer or an Mio situation of being a supporting character. Now, I did see some people reply to this initial message saying that Mia was the protagonist. I would push back on that a little bit because I thought that the main focal point of the story from Xenoblade 3 was largely told through Noah's perspective because, well, think about Chapter 1. What was that initial cutscene we got? It was Noah before the events of Ionios. We get into Chapter 1 and it's this tale, essentially, of Noah up to when he meets the Agnians. And then through most of the game, you can argue that it's kind of both of them, but then Chapter 5 and 6, I would argue, focuses more on Noah's perspective than it does on Mio's. And then at the very end of the game, when the world split back apart and Origin activates, and we get out of Ionios, whose perspective do we pick up on? Noah. So I would argue Noah is the sole protagonist of Xenoblade 3, but Mio's like 1A, as close as you can get, in my opinion. And honestly, I don't think it's impossible that Mythra's kid being the protagonist of Xenoblade 4 is out of the realm of possibility. They clearly want to have these kids be some kind of important characters in the lore. You had Mio being essentially that 1A protagonist for me for Xenoblade 3, and then you had Glimmer, who's a major character in Future Redeemed. I made a theory video a week or two back where I said I believe Mythra's kid is going to come back in Xenoblade 4, possibly as one of the main party members. Being the protagonist, I think, is a definite possibility, because kind of ticks all the boxes when you think about it. Xenoblade 4 is likely to pick up on the story of the worlds interlinking, which is what I still think happened. I think the worlds interlinked at the end of Future Redeemed. So Mythra's kid would be a new character, which is what Monolith tend to like to do for new numbered Xenoblade games, is have a new character. But that character would also still have ties to the characters we know and love, which would have to be a pivotal, important part of the story of these two worlds, or the worlds of 1 and 2, merging together again. So I think it's a definite possibility. Do I think it's a lock? No. But do I think it's a possibility, and a very likely possibility? Yeah, I think so. We hop on over to my Discord, link in the description down below, by the way, to join, where Jmulls has a very interesting observation and theory that I want to cover here. And bear with this one, it may seem unlikely at first, but just let it cook, essentially. I'm still holding to my Poppy is the new Aegis theory, or at least a heavy parallel to it. First piece, 3 forms. This is the weakest evidence, though some points to add to it. 1. Cutie, Poppy's second form, mind you, and Mythra both have increased evasion as one of their perks. 2. Pi is inspired by both main personalities of Mythra, Mythra's hair and Pyra's Aegis notably. Alpha's cape also turns into a scarf, which you could argue takes influence from Pyra and Mythra's split capes. That's a bit weak though. 3. Final forms are both busted, Numa lore-wise and Pi gameplay-wise. I would also argue Numa is busted gameplay-wise as well, just not in endgame, but if you don't have a super geared account for Xenoblade 2, and you get Numa, and you don't have access to all the blades, and then all at like S-rank affinity or something like that, Numa's very strong for chain attacks. And she can cover all the elements, so you can get whatever combination you want. She's very good for an unoptimized account. Second piece, in its own comment, Poppy has her own siren and artifice, in the form of Poppy Buster and the copy that pilots it. Copy is controlled remotely, while Buster is piloted by Copy. Mythra can control both Siren and Ophion remotely, but can pilot the former if she pleases. Third piece, again, own comment, mainly to not clutter one with a million picks. Both were designed to control something the creator wanted to control. Tora's family made artificial blades because no pawn is so rare to become drivers, and all of Tora's family weren't so. Science. With science, of course! Klaus wanted to control the big magic energy thing that popped into reality, aka the conduit. Or I guess at this point, aka the Zohar. Editing this in as an extension, this means they are both supercomputers or computers controlling said energy. Klaus was just a bit more, I control them all. God, I love Xenoblade X music. 4. They kinda said it here. P.S. Really cute scene, by the way. I agree. And that's really the main points I wanted to bring up. Back to this point, referencing the earlier Poppy is the new Aegis, at least a heavy parallel, not as weak of a point as I thought, cause Poppy and Mythra are the only 2 blades that have 3 forms. Nia, Jin, and Daga, stretch for him though, all only have 2, unless you want to call Queenia. Queenia? Is that the name we're going with Nia for Xenoblade 3, Queenia? I'm kind of on board with that. Form. And we kind of get into a discussion that I'm going to really elaborate on once we get to Xenoblade 2 in the Chronicles of Xenoblade series, where I break down all these games and all their scenes. Xenoblade 2 crossed a very important threshold when it comes to a fictional story's world parameters, and that's centered around the character of Poppy. They don't shove it in your face, and they kind of just go along with the flow of things. But it's an important character development, and I'd argue Poppy is one of the most important characters in Xenoblade Chronicles. Why is that? Because it is through the character of Poppy that they draw the parallel, or they at least establish, that in the world of Xenoblade, artificial creations can gain consciousness, can gain emotional maturity, emotional awareness, control their own independent thought patterns, and gain sentience. That is done through the character of Poppy. You may be saying, what about the Aegises? What about Logos, Ontos, and Numa? Aren't they technically AI? Yes, but they were hooked up to the conduit, or the Zohar. So you could at least draw a comparison saying, hey, maybe the reason they gain consciousness and gain these very human-esque forms in Xenoblade 1 and 2 is because of, in some part, due to the Zohar. That is not the case for Poppy. Tora, Grandpipon Susu, and doubt upon, they're the ones who made Poppy. The Conduit was not involved there. Unless you want to pull some, in the shadows the Zohar gave her life. I don't buy that, though. And they even made a point in, I believe it's chapter 4, where Poppy gets Lila's ether furnace. And it's from that point on that she slowly, over the course of the game, becomes far more human-like. And once that threshold is crossed, once they establish that artificial creations in this world can gain sentience, can gain emotions, know how to process them, and can experience those emotions all of their own, that is the threshold that is crossed, because they pick it up with Ino in Xenoblade 3. So they are continuing that trend. You could also just argue the Machina from Xenoblade 1. But again, Mayneth kind of made them, so depends. But Poppy's the real, hey, these characters that are not connected, that don't have Monados or anything, they made life through artificial means, but they're live. And with the Klaus saga now in the rearview mirror, what they may be trying to do is establish parallels to the stories of old and say, hey, the people of this world, they can create facsimiles of what came before. I think there is at least a parallel that they are trying to form here with Poppy to the various Trinity processes. What that parallel is supposed to be long-term speaking, we have to wait and see, but I definitely think there's something going on there. You could also draw a little bit of comparison with Poppy Cutie being dark by baseline and Poppy Cutie Pie being fire by baseline, and say, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of like Numa and Malos, isn't it? Or Logos. And then get Poppy Alpha, who's Earth, and just like, I like rocks. So it's not a perfect comparison in that regard, but there's a few similarities here. It's a very near storyline, N-E-I-R, for that series. And if you played those games, you know what I'm talking about. It's something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Very interesting. Now let's move over to Jam 13 Roll's theory that, in my opinion, is just hilarious. Mythra's child will be a legendary chef and have her own cooking spin-off game. I think that would be hilarious. I would counter with having Mythra having a game as well. But the idea that Mythra's kid just becomes a master chef, to me, would be hilarious. And I'm down for, like, fun, lighthearted parallels being drawn there. Let's move to Luke Delometer's theory here. It will take place years after the end of 3 in Future Redeemed. Talking about Xenoblade 4 here. It will seem entirely disconnected from the other 3 games at the start, outside of a few sparse side quest mentions. It won't fully tell you that it takes place on a combined interlinked world until the journey leads you into the core of the planet and you see either Origin or the cores that the Ouroboros have when interlinked but big. I think there's a definite possibility here. I could easily see them trying to tamper with our expectations, where a lot of people, myself included, kind of expect Xenoblade 4 to be a follow-up in some degree to the events of Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed. Just kind of expecting it. But Monolith love playing with the player's expectations. So, making it seem like it's a completely new story and a completely new world, and to be disconnected, but to drip feed us a few references here and there. Not enough to say definitively, oh, this world is connected, and some we may even just write off as funny little references and nice little jabs to the old games of old. Kind of like how Lyn in Xenoblade X has Monado hairpins, or like how Tatsu from Xenoblade X has Riki's weapons on its backpack. You know, the fun little stuff like that. Nice little lighthearted references. And then they hit us with the gut punch, like they did in Xenoblade 2, where Malice just busts out a Monado. And you're like, wait a minute, this world's connected. Or especially when you hear Shulk's speech at the end of Xenoblade 2. I could easily see them going that route somehow, and maybe even surprising us by having one of the main characters there be Mythra's kid. But we just never get it addressed, and they treat it like Mio for most of Xenoblade 3, where they never really even said flat out that Mio was Nia's kid. We just pretty much assume it, because they did everything but say it at the end of the game. But for most of the game, they treated her like her own character. And that character would have worked even if she was not related to Rex and Nia in any way. Because they wrote that character extremely well, in my opinion. They could do something similar with Mythra's kid here. I think that's a distinct possibility. Let's move on to Kug, who says, the reverse idea of fighting and destroying because of the end. What if it was the world and the villains fighting for a new beginning in a new, united world, where the people that were brought back by Origin could be subjugated by the people who want to rule or start this new world. This could also help continue Noah and Mio's story, and have them as a supporting character or supporting characters, and even have as a supporting character a certain descendant of an Aegis and a Chatosaurus. And this ties in very closely to the last comment I'm going to cover in this video from the Jared Punch, so I'm going to cover them both right here and just talk about my overall thoughts on them. Xenoblade 4 will focus more on human weaknesses. I feel like the very concept of Mobius and Zed makes me believe that Xenoblade overall is going to take the Persona route in my eyes. Shulk, and Rex to a lesser extent, created a world with no need for gods. So now it feels like the next course of action is to fight ourselves and our weaknesses as human beings, so that we can make sure that history doesn't repeat itself with Klaus. I would also kind of argue that Zed was meant to fulfill that role, because he's the manifestation of all those doubts and anxieties humans felt en masse, but having specific human characters be the antagonist is also a direction they could cover here. With the Klaus arc behind us, I definitely agree we're probably going to get far more personal and down-to-earth themes and messaging going into the future with this series, and I think having an antagonist that recognizes there's a massive power vacuum in this new world and try and step in to fulfill the role of being some kind of overall emperor or big boy, you know, the big boss of the new world, is definitely a plotline they could pursue, and tell a story about trying to bring humanity together when it seems certain aspects of humanity or certain parts of humanity are trying to rip themselves apart. You can have it be a very human tale of trying to find human unity in a world that seemingly has so much corruption and pain in it, perpetuated by other humans. All the while, you can have a subplot or the main plotline be that this new world is a result of interlinking between the worlds of Kevis and Agnes, but just like in Xenoblade 3, interlinks don't last forever. So while we're dealing with all these human issues and the political fallout from them, we could also be racing against the clock to try and keep these worlds united before the interlink runs off and the world is either destroyed because we can't uninterlink them, or they separate again. I think that's going to be one of the main themes in Xenoblade 4. We'll be trying to preserve this new world and fight for the collective good of humanity against the collective bad of humanity. In this world without gods, or this world of us trying to defy fate or destiny. We've already done that. Now it's up to us as humans to sort through our own problems and to fight to preserve this new world because we want to do that, and because this is our world. That as a storyline I think would fit perfectly within the confines of what has already been established in the Xenoblade storyline up to this point. You can even tie some Xenosaga stuff into that if you want as well. I haven't played Saga myself, I'm not experienced with those stories. I could also definitely just see Cosmos coming in as a character. Because yes, I do believe that that was Cosmos at the end of Future Redeemed. I 100% believe that. If you don't believe me, look up the ending of Xenosaga 3. Because I did, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is just what that is. I think Xenoblade 4 could be a very human story, and could be akin to Nier Automata in the respect that the game could be a breakdown of the human condition, where we're not trying to fight against a higher power, we're not trying to fight against the concept of destiny itself, we are fighting against other humans to preserve the good in humanity. I definitely think that's a step or the story direction they can take with Xenoblade 4, and personally I would be heavily in favor of a story along those lines. So I'm going to call the video there for the day, because we have so many comments, like I said at the top of the video. We had over 100 replies, 100 comments to that call to arms. Thank you so much. The next Xenoblade video will be part 2 of that older video I made for hot takes about Future Redeemed. We're going to do a part 2 to that, and then a couple days afterwards, on Friday, we're going to do part 2, the follow-up to this video. And then don't forget, on Saturday, June 3rd, will be episode 1 of the Chronicles of Xenoblade, where I break down this series entirely, piece by piece. And we're starting with Xenoblade 1. So thank you all for tuning in, my pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, buddy. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.